Hello, welcome. This is Kerry. You know me, I do the tarot card readings on this channel, and I do occasionally do a little video. I was doing Soulmate and Twin Flame support sessions, like little drop-in live sessions where you can have a free reading. I haven't been doing those for a little while. I will bring them back. It's just I go through my own little journey. So we will do more of those, because I know this Twin Flame Soulmate journey, that any intimate relationship's very hard, and that's the main focus of my tarot readings generally. You know, because if you watch the intro video to this channel, our relationships are the things that really trigger us the most, very deeply. Intimate relationships of any kind really do trigger us and touch us in the deepest places. They're really something designed by the Matrix to kind of trigger these deeper pain bodies and karmic patterns within us, to really aid our awakening. So they kind of accelerate our awakening journey. And you know, that's why the tarot readings, I do tend to zone in on relationships, although other things can obviously come up, like health, money, purpose, stuff like that. But you know, I am particularly interested in how our relationships awaken us and trigger us, you know, because it's very difficult coping with these situations, because they are so triggering, and you can feel very alone, and society's conditioning is very confusing, because society has conditioned us to believe that we should have a partner, that we should be in a successful relationship, and you know, it's it's also seems to be a need of the ego to have a relationship, but a lot of times, you know, relationships are really here just to awaken us back to self, and that is the journey of the Twin Flame mainly. But to be honest with you, family relationships very much do the same thing, and friendships, yeah, and obviously any other type of intimate relationship, like soulmates as well, or karmics as people call it. So in this video, I'm going to talk about, you know, how to transcend our level of how to evolve in consciousness, so that we transcend the need to be needy. Okay, so I'm probably not describing it properly, but I'll probably end up remaking this video. Excuse me. I'm always like this in the morning. So now it's worth hanging in there. Please bear with me, because you know, I'm not the best at these types of videos, but the information I will give you will basically help you to transcend this needy state. Okay, we're talking about transcending the ego to embody the full consciousness that you are, so that you no longer have to be needy. Okay, because the neediness is really killing you, and it's killing your relationships. And the thing is, it's a karmic pattern. It's a deep-rooted karmic pattern brought forward from past lives, and you know, most likely it's been exacerbated in this lifetime in your childhood. So you can track back your karmic patterns that you have in relationships, and you can see how they started off in childhood, but you can basically assure yourself that you've actually just brought it through from a past life, and it didn't get resolved and released in a past life. And that's why it's resurfaced in this life, right at the beginning of your incarnation, you know, as a child. So your parent relationships, or relationships with your caregivers, maybe sibling relationships, that type of thing. And your karmic patterns are basically just your any sort of negative mind patterns that you have around your relationships, particularly intimate relationships, will trigger these. And basically it is possible to get to a point where you don't feel needy anymore for a relationship. Now, everybody's journey to that is different, okay? Because ultimately, we've all got different life, you know, karmic plans, different divine plans. But for some of us, it is quite hard. It's very challenging, actually, to seem to break this karmic pattern of needing somebody to love us, whether it's the twin flame, whether it's the soulmate, whoever it is, you know. And it's like, it just feels so raw, and it feels so deep, and it feels so painful. So basically, you know, the way I have found my journey has been through the path of consciousness. And this guy here, Ramana Maharishi, was a guru who, you know, basically he was alive like 150 years ago. I think he was born about 150 years ago, something like that. And basically he realised the self. He kind of lived like Buddha, you know, and his teachings are what I really recommend, but they're quite advanced and quite hard to sometimes grasp. So I always kind of recommend looking at Muji or Eckhart Tolle to begin with. But if you really want the purest teaching, then Ramana Maharishi's your guy. So the main thing to understand, okay, is you are not your body, okay? So there's different aspects of you that are creating this needy feeling. And it's this needy feeling that creates all this pain when you're not with your twin flame, your soulmate, that kind of thing. And basically, the first level of understanding is to transcend this egoic need for a relationship and this neediness, because it's egoic, is to basically, even the pain is egoic, by the way. So the first thing to understand is you are not your body, okay? You are not your body. Before your incarnation, you did not have a physical body. And when you die at the end of your lifetime, you will not have a physical body, but your being will still continue to exist. You will reunify back with source consciousness, okay? And something that Ramana Maharishi taught was that basically an example of this is that when we go to sleep at night, we still exist, right? We exist as a pure consciousness when we are asleep. Now, when we are asleep, the body ceases to exist and the world ceases to exist. And this is kind of evidence really for us to understand that we are not the body, you know. It's just upon waking, when we open our eyes in the morning, that the body, we become aware of our body. It's called body consciousness. And as we wake in the morning and we realise, oh, I have a body, we rise as the body, and we start to identify ourselves as a body, okay? And that means because we're identifying ourselves as a body, we start to believe everything our body is telling us, and it's very distracting. It distracts us from our true nature, which is the actual pure conscious awareness. What we really are is the pure conscious awareness, and that is what the journey of enlightenment and self-realisation is all about. To fully and permanently realise ourselves as the self, as the pure consciousness, and to permanently be in that state, okay? Until we reach that permanent state, we are not fully self-realised. The ultimate truth is that we are all self-realised already, because our consciousness is always, our consciousness always exists from the moment from the moment of the beginning of time, okay? So our consciousness is always here. It's the true eternal awareness of who we are, and it's always aware and in a state of being. It's just the body and the mind that distracts us, and they are the obstructions, okay? So that's why we keep forgetting our real nature. So the first thing is you are not your body, right? So anything your body is telling you when you are yearning for a physical partner, when you're yearning for love, when you're having all those painful feelings arise, the bitterness, the pain, you know, the feeling like you're dying because you're not with somebody, all of those feelings are actually an illusion of the body, and it's only upon waking that you identify yourself as a body, and then you start to get very distracted and obstructed by your body. So that is the first thing we have to overcome. Also, upon waking, we rise as the ego mind. Okay, so we open our eyes in the morning and we become the ego mind. When we are asleep, in a state of deep sleep, we do not have the ego mind. We are fast asleep in the state of pure bliss and consciousness. And it is the same when we pass back to the spirit world when we die. You know, there's just no real thoughts there. It's just pure consciousness. And that is the state when we are in no mind or when we are asleep. And when we dream, that is actually ego. That is actually the ego mind rising and playing out various what they call vasanas, desires and fears. Okay, so fear-based thoughts and desire-based thoughts arise in the dream state, and that is actually emanating out of the ego mind. So it's kind of like your ego mind playing out certain stories, either fearful ones or desire-based stories. So that is actually what the dream state is. You know, so the dream state is actually ego. Now, when you awake in the morning, like I said, you wrongly identify yourself as the body, and you wrongly identify yourself as the ego mind, okay? Because these two factors come into play when you wake up. So it's important to start to understand that you are not the ego mind. Now, your ego mind is the false self, right? It's basically just literally the thoughts that you have. But out of those thoughts, you start to create an identity. And you can have all sorts of identities. I've gone through many. I have gone through many identities. You know, I don't know, the good wife, the wild woman, the good mother, you know, the, I don't know, mentally unstable, the victim, you know, oh my God, so many, right? The intellectual, the academic. Yeah, I've been through loads of different identities, and we all have, because the ego is just literally a collection of thoughts. It's a jumble of thoughts, actually, and what it tends to do is it tends to start to try and create an identity, and that's a coping mechanism to deal with the matrix. Yeah, because we're so distracted when we wake up, we see ourselves as a body, we start to believe our thoughts, and then from those thoughts it's basically the ego. We start to create an identity, and the thing is with the thoughts, they're just made in the mind. Well, they are the mind, and they're very distracting, and they obstruct us from actually just being the true self, the true spirit, the true being. And we start to believe our thoughts. We believe the desire-based thoughts, and we believe the fear-based thoughts, and we start to believe the identities that we create. One of the ways and evidences of knowing that the ego mind is not who we are is because it tends to change. Like I say, we tend to, in our lifetime, we can go through many identities, and they're all fake. You know, it's the fake self. Now, you know, it's not helpful, because the thing is, the ego is in separation. It's always going to be in separation. It's not the true being, you see. So that's why it's really important, if you're wanting to eradicate this needy feeling, you have to start understanding that you are not the body and you are not the mind. You are this true being within the center. Okay, this is the heart center is said to be the center of the being, the spiritual being that you are. But if you find that hard to connect with, you can just see yourself as the pure awareness, the pure observer of your life. Truly, you're actually not even an observer, because when you get truly enlightened, you don't really observe anything, because you just only see the self. Which is all of Brahman, you know, it's all of creation. Everything becomes one. So what's happening is you're waking, you're wrongly identifying yourself as a body, you're wrongly identifying yourself as the thoughts in your mind, and the body and the mind are completely in separation from consciousness, source consciousness. So the ego mind and the body will start telling you stories about what you want, you know, because they're in separation. And they will look externally always. The ego mind will always look externally, and the body will do the same. So then they start to grasp. They become very grasping and needy, you see, because they need to grasp onto something in order to exist. If the ego mind doesn't grasp onto something and the body doesn't, they kind of cease to exist, okay? Certainly the ego mind ceases to exist. The body just becomes, I mean, it's there, but in spiritual truth, even the body doesn't exist. It's not permanent, you see. But in any case, the ego mind, it just will always want more. And it will always distract you. It will always obstruct you from being the true being. Now, the true being, the true self, is the consciousness. And the consciousness is eternally linked to source consciousness. In fact, it's not just linked to source consciousness. The source consciousness is within you, you know. Your pure awareness being is the consciousness. It already is the consciousness. It's not just connected to it, it is. So once you're in that state, and that is the true state, that is the only state you can really experience happiness and oneness and love. Okay, because as you rise as ego, as the mind, and you go into the external world, the matrix, and you start grasping onto forms, you will never find happiness, because it's in the opposite direction of the self. You're going in the direction of the false self as opposed to the true self. The true self is within. Okay, now the true self is never needy, it's never grasping, it's never in pain, it's pure love, awareness, and it's who you really are. So that's why you're never really truly happy going externally for love or even satisfaction, you know, because what you're doing is you're going into the false self to try and find it, and you can't find anything in the false self that is going to be permanent and truly satisfying, because it's false. The true self here is the real self, and that's the only place that you'll ever be happy, because that abiding in the self is the only true happiness. Okay, now when you're going through a lot of pain, it can be quite hard to feel how beautiful being in the true self is. And, you know, I found that really hard. For the last 3 years, I've gone through a lot of different things, as you know. And it wasn't very peaceful, and it wasn't very nice being in the self, because I had lots of pain body coming up. But that sort of phase does pass, and eventually you'll find there's less and less pain body there, and you'll start to have moments where you can connect to the true self, and you can feel that there is a peace and calm and a love inside there, right? And it starts to become more and more that way, as long as you periodically just practice not engaging with the ego mind and not engaging with the body, and keep reminding yourself the mind and the body are not really real. They're not the true self, and they are the obstructions to your true self. Now, once you understand that you are not the body, you are not the mind, the next thing is to realise that the world doesn't really exist, okay? Whoa. So the world doesn't really exist. It's just an illusion, right? Because it's temporary. The only true eternal state is the self, because this is the pure consciousness that you are, and that's the only thing that will exist after your incarnation, right? So in actual fact, the world is a projection. It's a mental projection. You rise as ego minds. You look out at the external world, you see the objects and the forms, and you mentally project onto them. So a lot of the time what we're seeing and viewing really isn't actually real. They're just our own mental projections of how we interpret things and see things. And most of the time those things don't actually even exist. So we get drawn into this illusion. When we go to sleep at night, the whole world subsides back down, you know, and when we pass back to spirit, the world subsides back down. What happens when we look at the world is it gives rise to our ego, and then we start to project again. We start to project, and we start to go back into the ego persona. So it's really unhelpful looking at the world. Our primary focus always needs to be spirit within. Now, it's quite a hard pattern to break, because this is a deep-rooted karmic pattern. We've been conditioned to look externally for many, many lifetimes. So it's hard, you know. That's why people like me are here sharing our experiences. We're on this journey so we can all support each other with it, you know. Ultimately, the reason why we're incarnated is actually to transcend this ego, yeah, so that we can be the true spirit that we come here to be. And then ultimately we won't need to reincarnate. So this is really the reason why we're here. This is the journey we're on. But the one of the bonuses, one of the bonus points of this journey is that by learning to abide in the self and be the true consciousness, the true spirit you are, what happens is you are no longer engaging with the false self. And once you stop engaging with the false self, you won't be needy anymore. Okay, so if you've got this far in the video, well done, because I know there's quite a lot of challenging things that I'm bringing up here. And it's taken me 2 years of constant diligent practice on this. You know, and I'm still not like 100% realised, because I still drop into ego myself. So you are not the body, you are not the mind. The world does not exist. Okay, you are the pure spirit being. Now, the next thing, right, so when you look into the world, just suppose we do that. We're going to rise as ego when we're looking into the world, but say like we just do it as the pure observer being from the consciousness. What you're doing is, what you're actually doing is you're viewing what Eckhart Tolle calls multiplicity. Now, multiplicity is basically the many forms and objects. Now, the many forms and objects, people, you know, objects, they are all actually rising up from consciousness. They are all part of the creation, right? They're all part of Brahman. And this is multiplicity. So basically, we are all spirit beings, yeah? We're all pure consciousness. That is the ocean. And then the forms, the objects, the people are like the waves. They're like the ripples on the ocean, the multiplicity. So now that's what you're viewing. And this is how you start to understand the world as an illusion, because what's happening is you're over-identifying with the ripples and the waves in the ocean, you see? And that's drawing you into the illusion, because what the real truth is, the substratum underneath. It's the actual ocean, and it's the ocean that is the one eternal truth, because that is the unity consciousness of what we really, really are. But what's happening is when we wake up in the morning, we open our eyes, we rise as ego, we see all the ripples in the ocean, and we just get pulled into the ripples in the ocean. And that's why it's really unhelpful to believe that you are the ego mind. It's really unhelpful to identify yourself as the full self, as the ego mind, because the ego mind only sees these ripples and waves in the ocean. And what happens is, the more you view life in that way, the more obstructed you become from understanding that you are actually this substratum. And it's the substratum, the ocean underneath the waves and the ripples, where all the love is, where all the abundance is, you see. And when you are that, which you already are, you already are that, but when you start to understand and feel yourself as that through the practice and the diligence, that's when you can start to feel that love, you see, the love of spirit. The love of spirit, that's the substratum. It's underneath, it's within all of the time, but we are wrongly identified as the mind and the body, and that is pulling us into the illusion of the waves and the ripples. Now, that is the multiplicity. Now, so what you're viewing, when you're viewing your partner, your twin flame, your soulmate, you are getting wrongly identified as your ego mind and your body. You're getting pulled into the illusion of them as a person. They are an object, a form. What you're actually doing, your ego is attaching to their ego. What you're actually viewing is their full self, and your full self is attaching to their full self. And that's why you start to get all these needy feelings. You start to over-identify with the body. You start to over-identify with the stories in your mind about this person and why you need them. The ego is always going to need something to grasp onto, or it can't exist. So that's why it always wants a relationship, you know. It always wants attachments. The pure being consciousness, because it's part of the one, it doesn't have any needy feelings. And that's what we're, on this channel, I'm really trying to help people to come back to, because, you know, that's the journey I'm on. That's the journey we're all on, really. Now, you know, it's the needy feeling that causes the pain, the suffering, you know, feeling like you're apart from your twin flame, you're apart from your soulmate. Now, what happens is you're viewing when you're viewing your soulmate or your twin flame or a family member, what you're really doing is you're viewing their ego. You're viewing their patterns playing out, okay? Now, that is not really who they are. Now, underneath, because you're spiritually awakened, you can sense there's a being underneath there, can't you? All right? And that pure being is your pure being. But the thing is, now, if you are truly in your pure beingness, you would be just happy and content to not be with that person, because you know you're part of the same consciousness anyway, and you wouldn't keep experiencing this pain and suffering. It's because you keep slipping back into the false self. You keep slipping back into the ego, and then you're getting caught up in the story again of their ego, you know, because their ego's got a story too. And then you're slipping back into those patterns. Do you see what I mean? And that's the karmic patterns you're slipping back into. And then the pain rises, the neediness rises, the stories about what's gone on between you rises, and all these things. So, you know, happiness can only be found in the self, the true eternal oneness. And because the self is the only true reality. It's the only permanent state of being. The ego, the false self, you know as well as I do, the patterns you see play out in your twin flame or soulmate or your family member, whoever it is, you know they're not permanent states of being. You see that person's patterns rise up, and you see that person's patterns rise down, or not rise down, fade down, yeah? Because that's what ego does. It's not a real entity, you see. It rises up from the substratum, it plays out its little story, and then it subsides back down because it's not really real. It can't sustain itself, okay? So basically, the multiplicity is ego. What you're observing in your partner or person is ego. It's the fake self. You're getting caught and drawn into their fake self, and you're also rising as your false self, you see, and that's why you're experiencing the neediness. So that's what we really ultimately want to transcend all of that, to just be the self, you know, and then you're content to allow all the ripples and the waves in the ocean to, you know, be there, but you're not really focused on those ripples and waves, because you just abide in the self. You abide in pure oneness and bliss at all times. That's the state of permanent self-realization. You know, I'm not there yet. I still slip into ego. I still slip into stories. I still slip into identifying myself as a body. I still slip into over-identification with people's patterns playing out an ego. But I'm learning more and more every day after 2 years, you know, that we aren't really here to identify ourselves as the ego mind or view other people's ego and be needy of it. You know, and I'm always reminding myself that I am really a being, you know, and that's where my love is coming. And I'm starting to feel that love more and more come out. So there's less pain, there's less suffering. Do you see what I mean? There's less neediness in me now, because I don't identify myself constantly as the person Kerry. I identify myself as the being, you see. So that becomes more the natural resting place. The natural resting place is the self. When you're in your false identity and you're looking at a partner, that is actually not your true resting place, and that's why you never really feel 100% happy there. You're only going to feel 100% happy in here. So abiding in the self is the only true happiness, because you are not the ego. The ego is the false self. The only true self is the being. So you can't be happy as the false self. You can only be happy when you're the true being, you see. And when you're the true being, you are feeling the oneness, the love of spirit within you. And you don't see your own ego, because your own ego just subsides down, and it's like you therefore don't really see the world. The world sort of ceases to exist. The world subsides down, and you just see the self, and you just feel the beingness, the love inside. That becomes your more natural. You know, it's becoming more natural for me now that is kind of my state of being. Not all of the time. I'm looking forward to when it does become more consistently there. But what I'm finding is that as my beingness is becoming my natural resting place, the world is not so in my face. Other people are not in my face, and I'm not feeling constantly like I'm in pain or needy. Now, so basically, what you've got here is, if you have no desire, you have no ego, because it's only the ego that has desires. The consciousness doesn't have any desires, right? So if you look at the world, it will give rise to your ego. So the best thing to do is you don't look at the world, so then you've got no ego. If you've got no desire, you've got no ego. And when you've got no ego, you've only got the true self, you see? And when you've got the true self, that's when you have the true eternal love. Once you have the real self, you're real. See? There's no false persona there. There's no attachment. There's no grasping. There's no neediness. You just are the true self. When you're the true self, things become more calm. And basically you just go about your daily life not really thinking about things so much, you know? You just go about your daily activities and you just feel more calm. You know, and so it's like you don't really feel needy like you used to, and you don't really feel pain like you used to. And when it does rise up, you just remind yourself, oh, that's just my body that's telling me I want that, but I know I'm the true self. Or, oh, that's just my ego mind telling me a story. I don't need to listen to that story. I'm the true self, you know? And sometimes you don't even have to have those thought processes. It's just natural. You're just abiding in the self, and you're just feeling at one with the self. And you start to feel that love coming from spirit more and more within inside yourself, because that's really what you are. And it's there all the time. The only thing that's obstructing it is the messages your body's giving you because you're listening to your body too much, or the messages that your mind's giving you because you're listening to your mind too much. And I decided, when I realised all of this, I don't want to be my ego. I don't want to listen to the ego because it's fake. It's the false self. I don't want to be the false self. Now, it's taken me 2 years to really start being able to consistently practice this, because I didn't really want to give up my false self. Part of me liked it. Part of me was addicted to certain things, you know, and I didn't want to give up that identity. But in the end, I just realised all it's doing is causing me suffering. What's the point? Do you see what I mean? So I'm creating this video really because I know not many people are going to be able to watch it. It's quite deep. I'm introducing a lot of subjects that your ego will probably want to fight. You know, my ego's fought a lot of these things the last couple of years, but the more you go back into ego, the more you go back into over-identifying with all the ripples and the waves on the ocean, the more you get bitten, because that's what the Matrix is designed to do, to bite us, basically. Now, if a partner is in your divine plan, that's down to spirit, that's down to God, and there'll be nothing you can do to get away from that partner, and there'll be nothing they can do to get away from you, because it's in your karmic plan that you're supposed to be together. So in the path of consciousness, we are basically saying that we reject everything, push everything away and reject it, because that's the only way you'll ever know if something really is supposed to be in your divine plan. And I would rather know what's in my divine plan. And it is scary to push someone away that you've had an attachment to. Is really scary. The ego will fight it tooth and nail, because the ego doesn't want to give up its attachments. Without the attachments, the ego ceases to exist, and you're just left as the true self. It's quite a difficult process to go through, because when you've been identified as an ego for so long and you've had your little self-created identity, you sort of like, you feel frightened. Who am I going to be without it? But it's so worth giving up, because it's much nicer to just be the true self. And the thing is, once you're the true self and you feel the love of source, you become less needy. Now, that's a much nicer vibration for the people that are in your life. You know, you're less needy, you've got less pain body, you're less grasping, you're less demanding, you know, and that creates such a lovely energy. And what is it? It's the real self. The real self is all of those things, you know. It's just peace and love, and it doesn't grasp, and it doesn't need anything, and it doesn't demand. That's the ego. And that's why we end up pushing people away when we're needy, because nobody's going to fall in love with that energy, you know. Once you transcend all of the ego and the body consciousness, you're starting this process of becoming the true self. And that's really what people fall in love with. That's really what spirit is. And then you're becoming what Papaji would call like a beautiful flower, basically. And you're just emanating out your true spirit. And that's what you've really come here to be. So that's in a nutshell what the way that I can recommend to transcend the pain and the neediness and the suffering of this twin flame or soulmate situation or any other kind of relationship in your life that's causing you suffering. Okay, it's not about that person. It's not about trying to attract them or trying to change them or waiting for them. It's about your journey back to self. It's your journey to remove the obstructions of the body and the mind so you can come back to being the true self that you were. And once you are the true self, you know, you're going to open up a portal to spirit. And then it's going to be much easier for spirit to bring you what's truly in your vibrational alignment and what's truly in your divine plan. So, you know, that's how I can recommend it. And I'm sending you so much love. It's quite a long video, but I hope maybe a few of you might watch it and be like, Kerry, that has actually helped me. Now, I just want to say as well, it is a big journey to go on. It's taken me 2 years to get this far. And I'm still, you know, I'm still slipping into ego sometimes. I'm still over-identifying with my body too much sometimes. I'm still sometimes getting drawn into the matrix and, you know, a bit of attachment sometimes. So, you know, I'm still, you know, it does take diligence and everything like that. It takes persistence. And it's easy. I tell you why, because society, our conditioning in the matrix is so powerful, and it will constantly tell you that you should be in a relationship. It will constantly tell you that you should be getting enjoyment from sex or relationships or connections. And it's so counterproductive. And that's why we have to see the world as being unreal, because it's basically conditioning you with the wrong information to keep you in separation from yourself. You see, the world is really the matrix, and it's designed to keep you stuck in samsara. It's designed to keep you stuck in the illusion. So that's why it takes time, really, for most people to do this journey back to self. And it's not easy, because you're basically in the matrix that's designed like a maze to confuse you all of the time. And just when you make breakthroughs, you'll find the strangest things happen, and you know, that person will contact you when you've just got to a point where you feel like you don't need them. They'll contact you, or you'll meet somebody else, or something will happen, and then you think, oh my God, I just got to a point where I felt like I really didn't need anybody, and now this has happened. Because that's what the matrix is designed to do. It's designed to trigger us and keep us stuck in this illusions, to keep us stuck in this samsara. So the whole thing I'm talking about here is hard. And also your ego's got a real momentum from past lives and this life to think that the ego and the thoughts are who you are. The thoughts of wanting somebody or being bonded to somebody is real, that it's what you need. You know, those conditionings are really deep. They're deep rooted, and Eckhart Tolle says they've got a lot of momentum, and that's why they're hard to break. So I just want you to know that, you know, you can book in with me for sessions. You can book in with me for tarot readings, or if you just want sessions where we talk about this type of stuff, about, Kerry, how do I do this? Because I'm finding it hard. I keep slipping back into yearning for this person. I keep slipping back into pain. And we can, you know, sometimes it takes more than one session, you know, like it's been taking me 2 years. And there are gurus, you know, Ramana Maharishi's books, Eckhart Tolle, Mooji, Papaji, they're the people I recommend. Because they're all pointing you in the right direction. In here, this is where the love is. And 3 years ago, I no way understood it. I did not feel love inside myself whatsoever. I think most of the people watching this channel are starting to realise moments where you can feel the love in here and you don't feel so needy anymore. And that's good, because that means you are on this journey home and you're really making progress. But it can be really hard because the matrix is confusing, people are designed to trigger us, and we've also got external energies like solar flares, full moons, things like that. So if you want to book in for sessions with me, you know, you can book in any time. Like, just say to me when you can do it and we'll try and figure it out. You know, usually the best thing is, like, if you want to say, can I book in tomorrow or something like that, and we can arrange an actual time. Sometimes I can do ad hoc. It just depends on how my day is going and what I'm doing, because don't forget, I'm taking time out so that I can connect into self, and that means I have to push the world away. So if I don't reply you straight away, it's not because I'm ignoring you, it's that's the reason why. But yeah, you can book in with me because you sort of like need a buddy. We call it consciousness buddies, you know, because what you're trying to do is transcend the matrix and transcend the ego, and 90% of the population in this Mother Gaia is not doing this. So it's hard to find a consciousness buddy to support you on this, but it's worth it, because the thing that kept coming into my mind every time I found it difficult and my ego was really clawing at me to stay back in the illusion and stay as this false self, and to keep attached to certain people, I just kept saying to myself, no, because I don't want to be needy anymore. I don't want to be needy. I don't want to be in suffering. I don't want to feel like a victim. I don't want to be like, you know, that type of person anymore. And I don't want to be experiencing that anymore. It's too much suffering. And when you get to that point, you just know. You know when you know, and you know when you're ready to give it up and come back to the true self. And truly, you're not giving anything up. You're actually going to gain everything. So that's the video, and I'm sending you lots of love and peace wherever you are on Gaia, and do contact me if you need to, okay?